I never thought a lock could change the shape of a neighborhood. But that's exactly where this begins. 3 muddy prints cut across my backyard, and a woman I'd smiled to at barbecues walked through my gate like it was her mailbox. Her name was Marla Green, board president, always polished, always sure. She had that look people give when they believe rules live to bless their judgments. And when I watched the footage later, her shoes, her little nod, I felt a small, surprised anger that grew the way all real anger does, slowly and then all at once. We tried polite first. I raised my hand at the monthly meeting and asked, in the calmest voice I could find, "Why did you come on my property?" She answered with that practiced tone: inspections, safety checks, the community's best interest. The room did what rooms do, leaned one way or the other. Some people nodded like she'd spoken scripture. Others shifted uncomfortably. I left that meeting with 2 ideas. Rules protect the ones who write them. And if you don't protect your home, nobody else will. So I put a smart lock on the gate. Not theatrical, just practical control: who comes in, get a timestamp if someone does. It felt reasonable. To Marla, it felt like defiance. 2 days later, she pounded on the gate until the porch light blinked. "You can't deny board access," she said, voice flat, eyes like a principal disciplining a student. I told her, politely, to schedule. She walked away with that small, satisfied lift to the chin people get when they've made their authority known. Then the paper started. An envelope under my door, a notice of noncompliance with a fine attached, official-looking, sealed, intimidating. Letterhead, a signature, a due date. I called the law firm named in it. They had no record. I emailed the HOA address on the notice. It bounced back. At first I thought bureaucrats make mistakes. Then another notice came. Then a certified letter. Then a final notice with a demand for immediate payment. The emails looked right if you weren't looking closely. The documents felt right if you didn't know how easy, right, can be faked. When you're the kind of person who keeps receipts, you start collecting them. I saved each envelope, screen-capped emails, pulled camera footage. A neighbor, Matt, knocked with his own story: a landscaping vendor that always somehow matched a treasurer's last name. A charge for tree removal that no one could remember approving. Small things that feel petty alone, but when you stack them, a pattern forms. I played my footage at the next meeting. My hand shook while I hit play. There she was, Marla, walking my yard, talking into her phone like giving a tour. A few people murmured. Marla smiled and dismissed it as routine. Denise from 2 doors down stood and said, plainly, "You don't just enter someone's property." That line split the room. On one side, people who trusted the board to keep things pretty, and on the other, folks tired of being policed by someone else's idea of order. After the meeting, an anonymous packet appeared on my porch: photocopies of invoices, check stubs, vendor receipts. Some names were real companies, others were shell names. I took them to a forensic accountant who looked at the trail and told me what I suspected: payments routed through small LLCs, reimbursements that coincided with board-approved projects, vendors with addresses that matched relatives. Not proof of grand theft yet, but a crooked map, and crooked maps become crimes if people follow them. Detective Alvarez came in with a patient, steady voice. "We see impersonation often," he said. "Make it official enough and people bow to it." He subpoenaed records, traced email headers, and the thin veneer began to flake. Domains were spoofed. Signatures were photocopied. Contracts existed on paper, but not in bidding records. It wasn't dramatic in a movie way, it was paperwork, and it was cruelly effective. When the prosecutor filed charges: wire fraud, embezzlement, impersonation, the neighborhood reacted like a small town in a novel. Some called it a witch hunt. Others admitted, quietly, they'd felt uneasy for a while. The tragic thing was how plausible the "for the good of the community" story sounded. There's a comfortable lie people tell themselves, that someone has to make unpopular choices to maintain value and peace. That lie makes the true cost invisible until it's not. The tipping point was public. News vans pulled up, cameras on tripods, microphones like accusing fingers. Once it was a spectacle, people who had been silent found words. A woman who'd been fined for a tiny garden gnome told the camera she'd paid out of fear. A retired teacher described a vendor who always showed up with the same invoice number. It's one thing to grumble over a fence. It's another to see an invoice trail that points to a cousin's company and realize the rules served profit more than community. I remember the moment the prosecutor set a paper on the table and everyone could see the pattern, vendor after vendor, check after check, and the room felt like it had been split open. That hush was loud. People who had trusted Marla's firm hand looked at each other like strangers. I felt awful for wanting to be left alone, but also fierce, the kind of fierce that shows up when you know your privacy has been treated like a commodity. My wife squeezed my hand in the courtroom once, and that small touch kept me steady when the evidence felt like a weight on the chest. Marla on the stand was composed, precise, the old smile that convinced people she was reasonable. When the prosecutor asked why she entered my yard without permission, she said, calm as clockwork, it was to ensure safety. When asked about vendor payments, she called discrepancies administrative errors. There's a curious strain in people who morph protection into control. When you wrap your choices in the language of duty, even wrongdoing sounds like responsibility. There were sharp exchanges too, the kind of lines that cut clean. At a hearing, Marla leaned close in that cold, small room way and said, low and bitter, you made this personal. I answered, measured because the courtroom was watching. It's personal because it's my home. Those brief, felt moments, not loud, not cinematic, but real, showed what the dispute was about. People, not policies, and how quickly policies forget that. Guilty on multiple counts was not a fairy tale finale. After the verdict, we had to rebuild trust, messy, boring, necessary work. Emergency meetings, new bylaws, transparent budgets, required bids for any contract, recusal rules if a board member had family ties to a vendor. We created an oversight committee and recorded minutes. We trained ourselves to ask for receipts and to question familiarity that smelled like favoritism. It was less dramatic than an arrest, but it rearranged how power worked in our little world. I changed too. I was the homeowner who waived and paid taxes. I became someone who read meeting minutes at night, who asked questions at forums, who chaired a temporary committee until we had a proper election. It was uncomfortable and necessary. The person who takes action becomes someone other people can point to when they want a neighbor who cares. That's an odd responsibility. You don't ask for it. You earn it by getting angry enough to do the small, relentless work. And the ending, there isn't one that ties neatly. We recovered some funds. We installed safeguards, but the spreadsheet an anonymous neighbor posted suggested more corners unexamined. Oversight is a muscle. It atrophies when no one uses it. We elected a new board, and for now the neighborhood breathes easier. But we keep the cameras, the audit trail, the bids. We kept the smart lock, a modest thing that reminds me how fragile privacy can be. On the last night before the new board took over, the cul-de-sac gathered for a potluck. Neighbors mingled. Someone played a guitar badly but with heart, and Marla's old house sat quiet across the street. I looked at the gate, the smart lock blinking like a small, stubborn lighthouse, and thought how a piece of metal and code can mean so much when people misuse authority. This whole thing taught me that community is not a passive state. It's active, inconvenient, often boring, and sometimes painfully public. But when neighbors speak up, small systems bend back toward fairness. So tell me, have you ever had a small authority make a big choice for you? Drop your story below. Tell us which side you're on, rules that save or rules that take, fairness or quiet control, and if you were in my shoes, what would you have done?